All right. Well, welcome everybody to our final session for our Resilient Marriages seminar. I know I've been enjoying the messages, and I've heard great things from you guys. We're going to open up with a word of prayer as we begin. Father in heaven, we want to praise you as a God of love and a God of marriage. That you have covenanted with us as your people, and your faithfulness endures forever. We pray, Lord, that the message tonight would continue to deepen the marriages here and us as Christians, that our covenant or the covenant between spouses, or our own covenant with you, would be even stronger because of what we learned tonight. Pour out your Holy Spirit over us, Lord. We want to hear a word from you. We want to be encountering you, and we want to be able to go forth with the light you've put in us into a world that so desperately is looking for it. We ask this in Jesus' name. Amen. It's all yours. So what's the time? So we'll be ending around 6, and then we're going to do a refreshments and then.
All right. Did anyone get some rest this afternoon? I know there was a big group of you that went to sing at the convalescent home. So I will say this. I've already told you that I love Bonners Ferry area, your church design, but your potluck was also very delicious. So 5 stars so far. So thank you. And the friendships, the conversations we had were also very enriching. So thank you guys all for just your hospitality, and we're grateful, as they say, to be in God's country. So we'll take a picture and put it in. This will be in our Christmas card this year. We'll take a picture out there. We've missed 3 years, but one. We'll do it. Anyway, for those of you, was anybody not here last night? Okay, so there was 1 or 2. So one of the things that we talked about last night, and I believe there should be sheets that are out there, we basically talked about the importance of understanding how you were made, like your makeup. The idea is that every single one of us has 5 basic needs, and so we're not going to go through that for everyone that was there last night. But we want to encourage you to pick up the worksheet. It'll say session 1, and the idea behind the 5 needs is if you can understand yourself better, if you can understand your spouse better, then the hope is that you're able to communicate in a way where you can meet the needs of each other, or you can meet your own needs and then be able to have those conversations. And that's important because so much of the problems that happen in marriages is not understanding why we do and feel the way that we do. And so that was the importance of those 5 basic needs last night. Let me just do this real quick. All right, so we're going to get started with the next day 2. And today you're going to find a lot more practical tools, because I know a lot of times when we come to marriage seminars, we want to get some tools, we want to know how to communicate better and things like that. And as we have said, what we want to do is help you to go even deeper than that so that you can have long-lasting benefits. Because what we've noticed is if we just learn how to communicate better, but we're still mad at each other all the time, you're just angry communicating, right? And that's not a happy, healthy marriage. So we want to begin. I want to begin by telling you a short illustration. So we have friends, my associate pastor. They have a young, how old is Dominic?
He'll be 2 next month.
Okay, 2 years old. And last year when I ran the Chicago Marathon, we had all of our friends were there cheering me on. It was really great. And at the end of it, we had another friend of ours. She's like the fun aunt that all the little kids have because she brings them toys, she spoils them with sweets, and on this particular day, she came back from, I don't know where it was Starbucks, and she had cake pops for all the kids.
Because she knows our girls love cake pops.
Our girls like cake pops, right? We've kept them away from sugar as much as possible, but every once in a while they get a little bit of sugar. So she knew that she could bring cake pops for them. But for Dominic, that's the little boy, she gave him a cake pop, and the parents didn't see. And so Dominic is sitting in his stroller, happy as can be, with chocolate all over his face, and that was the very first, sugar.
That was the first sugar he'd ever had.
And the parents, they're first-time parents, as a lot of us are, where we have a very specific way we want to raise our kids. And I think it's funny now, but, back then it wasn't so funny for them. But here's the reason I'm telling you that story. For Dominic, that created a mental picture in his mind of how delicious sugar is. Now they've started giving him cookies from time to time. That is
Like fig Newtons. They're still very careful.
But here's what Dominic does now. My associate pastor Dave was telling me, this was just last week when we were traveling together. He said, whenever Dominic wakes up, he says, cookie? And he's so cute.
It's been, 6 months, and he still does that every morning.
In his brain, Dominic created a mental image of what brought him joy. Now you think to yourself, okay, that's a little kid. Of course, all little kids like cookies and cake and sugar. But here's the thing. Little kids start these mental images from a very young age. But as adults, you have mental images in your mind about how you think the world should be. So I'm going to call this. Hey Austin, can you switch over the ATEM or whatever the button? Whatever button is, so we can get the. I thought that's what it was called.
Pastor, it should be on that panel in front of you. It says desk, it says computer, and then you switch over. It should be.
There it is. And 3, 2, 1. All right. So these mental models that we have, we call this our ideal world. So every single one of you has a mental model about how you think everything in your world should be. How people should drive. How people should talk to each other. How people should treat each other. How church should be. How your spouse should talk to you, or how your spouse should meet your needs. Feel free to jump in whenever.
Yeah, and this also, when we talked last night about, your 5 needs, it also includes pictures of how you want to meet your needs, how you want to spend your time, where you want to work, how you want to raise your family, where you want to live, everything, how you want to do the dishes, how you want to load the dishwasher, all of those things, it's all in there.
If you should clear
you
the
do it wrong.
How you should clear the microwave. Is it too soon to tell that story?
I mean, you can tell it, but it fits later.
Okay, it fits later, but it fits perfect here. So one of the early marriage foibles in our marriage, so one of the things I do when I heat something up in the microwave, whatever it is, right? Like if it's a slice of pizza, I'll put it in there, and then I'll just hit the 1-minute button. And then like 20 seconds in, I take it out, pull it out, close it, walk away, and enjoy my slice of pizza. But there's 40 seconds left on the microwave timer.
So then I come down, and first of all, I can't see what time it is.
Oh, yeah.
And then if I go to put something in the microwave, I have to push an extra button.
And so early in our marriage, it drove her up the wall. And I would be like, what's the big deal? Just hit the clear button and move on. But here's what's funny about that. It's a funny illustration. It wasn't funny when we had to keep talking about this. I've gotten better at it.
Yeah, 'cause
I try to. But here's the thing. She has a mental model that it should be cleared. Something as small as that, and you all know this, being married, little things is what bring big annoyance, and especially when it's repeated. But because we have these mental models of how we think everything should be, and when your partner isn't doing that, then it makes you frustrated. So everybody has an ideal world, and this is not just marriage. Putting the toilet seat down. Oh, hey, listen, we're good. I'm just kidding. Oh, gosh.
And it just frustrates me so much.
Yeah, and that's a mental model.
Why did ladies leave the toilet seat down?
Oh, yeah, why didn't they? That's a, that is so funny. That's true. That is a thing. But do you see what I'm saying? Like, it's oftentimes we think in our marriages that we have to get the big things right. Are we praying every day? Are we reading our Bible together? Are we X, Y, and Z? But marriage is about the little decisions and behaviors you do every single day that will either, and we're going to talk about this in a minute, bring you closer together or drive you further apart. And so we all have an ideal world, and this is true not just for marriages, this is for everything in your life. You have a mental model of how you want everything to work. But what ends up happening is that there's an ideal world, and then there's the actual world that you live in. And a lot of times what happens in your actual world, as in our example or all the examples you've just mentioned, in the actual world doesn't always meet our ideal world. And when your actual world, as you're living in life, doesn't meet your ideal world, that's where frustrations come in. That's when you get angry. That's when you get bothered. That's when you honk on your, well, here's probably not an issue, but back home in Chicagoland, one of the things that drives, one of my mental models is that if you're going to exit or take a different highway, and the line is backed up, we'll get in the back of the line. You don't get to cut at the very last minute because you don't want to wait. Like that is, so I am a bad Christian in those moments. You can judge me if you want to, but I hug the car in front of me and don't let anybody in because it goes against my mental model, my ideal world. And so here's what happens. When your actual world doesn't meet your ideal world, your inner life becomes unbalanced. You start getting more frustrated. The things that didn't frustrate you now all of a sudden are frustrating you all the time. When your ideal world isn't being met with your actual world, you start getting higher stress. And the higher stress, we know this, makes you sick, makes you anxious, makes you stressed out, makes you not be a kind, loving follower of Jesus. And so it is important for us to understand what is our ideal world and where it doesn't meet up with our actual. Everly, you can come up. Everly. Sorry, our daughters. Okay. So when your actual world isn't meeting your ideal world, that's where a lot of problems happen. And what ends up happening in marriage, this is where the fights, this is where the frustrations, this is where the anger starts to happen because your ideal world isn't being met. This is true for your wants that we talked about last night. When your wants aren't being met, that's your ideal world, then you become frustrated. And so the question then becomes, okay, so what do we do? So it's clear that our world isn't always going to be ideal. So how do we begin to work on our marriage, especially when it's not meeting our mental model? What do we begin to do?
And again, when this goes back to last night when we talked about, the most important part of a marriage is two healthy individuals. And so this comes down to being able to identify your own mental models and to see when those things are in play, and being able to communicate. And that is really hard because some of these things are so ingrained in us. I mean, there is still, I have friends who will talk about shows and I'll say, oh, I'm not allowed to watch that. It's like, well, no, I'm 38 years old. I can watch whatever I want. But because my mom told me when I was 5 years old, I'm not allowed to watch that, these things stick with you. And so these things are built. And so sometimes it's hard to really pinpoint that. And so that's where it comes in again to just following it down, asking the next question, why do I think this? Why is this bothering me? And just keep asking that until you get there. And one of the most interesting ways that we have come to think about our marriage is to not think about the two of us as our marriage. A lot of times we think, okay, what is a marriage? A marriage is a husband and a wife. It's the two of us. We want to ask you to change and to think about your marriage as this space right here in the middle. Because your marriage is what happens in between. Your marriage is everything that you put into it. Imagine, we've talked about, the beach ball analogy a lot in last night and in David's sermon today. So imagine that your marriage is this little beach ball in between you. And so sometimes you're going to be doing things to smack that beach ball and to deflate it. And how are you then inflating your marriage? How are you taking care of that? Or, if you're a gardener, if you like to plant, you can think about your marriage as a plant in between you. And so whenever you are about to say something, about to do something to your spouse, think about how is this going to affect that plant? How is this going to affect that beach ball? Is it going to give it life or is it going to take life away? And when you take away the, I'm doing this to my other person, because a lot of times what happens in a marriage is like, well, I'm not getting what I want. They should help me do this. Or I have done so much for them They need to do something for me. And we get into that back and forth, that scorekeeping. And so instead of saying, hey, can you just push that button so that the microwave is clear? It's changing it to see like, okay, if I complain about this, like what is this doing in there? Or I can just push a button. And the same thing has happened for him too, because, I have noticed more often in our years that it is clear.
I'm really curious to hear what you're about to say.
No, it has been cleared a lot more lately.
It has, I tried. Because we got an air fryer.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So.
And one of the,
You wanna-
let's go back to this one real quick. And a lot of times, what Kara was saying, in marriages, it's really easy for us to keep score. It feels like I've been doing this so much. I've been serving my wife. When Kara and I did our premarital coaching for our own marriage, the lady that we spoke to, she says, well, what is going to make a good marriage? She asked me, and I was, chivalrous, and I said, well, I want to serve my wife. Everything I do, I want to serve my wife. And her name is Kim, and she said, that's really great. Like, she smiled. And she goes, but what happens when you feel like she is not serving you the same level as you're serving her? And I said, well, it doesn't matter because I'm going to serve her. And she said, it sounds good right now because you're not living together, you're not married, you're not sharing bank accounts, you're not making decisions, you don't have children. Right now it's easy. You guys are, we long distance dated our entire time that we dated and were engaged. She says, there's going to come a time when it's not going to work for you anymore because you're going to wish that she gave you more in return. And so when we think about, and so what happens is you're going to keep score and your spouse will never have the same score as you. It will always be less. Even if your wife or husband is the best, you are always going to see what you are doing as having done more, and that's going to cause a deficit in your perception of your marriage. And so that's why you can't keep score. Because it's a losing battle. And when you think about the space in the middle, let me give you this example. How many of you don't have to raise your hand, but because I know the answer to this is true. We all know someone, let's say you're at work, and there's always that one person that walks in, and as soon as that person walks in the room, they're always down, they're always depressed, and they sucks the joy out of the room. You've all been there, right? You've also known people who are really fun and happy and, real positive, and you can be feeling down and you kind of like start to feel a little bit happier, but you don't want to because you want to stay a little bit mad, but their energy brings you up. And that's because we know that the science is that in many ways we're constantly, giving out energy, whether it's negative or positive. And what ends up happening is in a marriage, this is the same. There's been times where, I've come home at the end of a long day and I'm annoyed, I'm angry, I'm frustrated. For a while there, I would come home and say, I didn't get anything done today. The life of a pastor, we set out with a good agenda, but you get 10 phone calls or whatever, or different meetings come up, and then I don't get some of the bigger projects that need to get done, hence my dissertation. I don't know who I was talking to, Brett. I have an extension. I have 5 more weeks to finish this thing. But a pastor's life, it just gets interrupted. And so I come home and I'm just like angry, and you feel.
Oh yeah, I feel it. And we had to have a discussion where I had to say, you cannot say those words anymore. And I need you, and you are allowed to take a few extra minutes outside, because a lot of times it was, he didn't get anything done because he felt like he needed to rush home to be with us at dinner. And I said, I would rather you stay later at your office and get one thing done where you feel productive, get to a place, or even just to collect your thoughts, and then be able to walk in the door and be present. And so, and that came from being able to have a conversation and saying, like, what you're bringing into this room, it's affecting us, it's affecting our kids, it's affecting our entire house and how we operate. And so we had to have that conversation.
Because you're constantly putting out a feeling, an emotion. And when you think about, I don't know if I'm skipping forward.
No, let's give him the question. And so, go ahead, go to the next slide. And so, this is a question that you can think about: is what you are doing, is it helping or is it hurting? Is what you are about to do or say, is it going to bring you closer together or push you farther apart? Because when you process that, when you start to use this before you act, then it helps you to, to just pause for a second and say, okay, yeah, I can say, he can walk into the kitchen and I can say, hey, remember when we had that conversation about you pushing the button? You didn't do it again, and I had to do this again. And what is that gonna do? And then how is that gonna set us up for the rest of the day? And what is that gonna do again? And it's just these little tiny moments that make or break your marriage.
Because the real question is what do you want out of this marriage? Because you can give into your emotions all the time and your emotions of anger, and Scripture tells us that the heart is deceitful. And so sometimes we want to be upset. I mean, you don't have to raise your hand, but sometimes you want to be hurt. Sometimes you want to be sad. Sometimes you want to be upset or annoyed. Like, I get that, but the question is, what do you want for your marriage? And oftentimes those negative feelings have to shift. You have to shift your mindset. We're going to teach you how to do that so that you can have the marriage that you want.
So we're gonna show you who likes math. We're gonna give you a little equation. Fun fact, David is not good at math unless you ask him about a percent. Because David likes to shop. And so if you say, he'll say, oh, hey, this is 30% off. And I'm like, well, how much is that? He'll say, out like that. And then if Everly comes in with her kindergarten homework and says, hey, what's this minus this? Or how do you do this? He's like,
Ask your
where's
mom.
my calculator? Yeah.
Our roles are reversed. I like to shop because I grew up poor, and my father always taught us that how we dress and present ourselves is how people are going to treat you. So I have kindergarten pictures of me wearing, I went to public
That
school.
outfit.
Yeah, this outfit, slacks and like a collared shirt tucked in with my hair combed a little bit longer than it is now. But that's a mental model for me. And so for me, I will dress better or try to. I mean, I don't go and shop that much because that's a mental model for me. And so, but for Kara, remember last night, she's a saver, so I don't go and have shopping sprees. I get stuff on sale or go to like the Nordstrom rack, to get the stuff. But did you see what I'm saying? Like, we're constantly making decisions. We're just not aware of it. We're not aware of how ingrained how you grew up is in you. We're not aware of the experiences that you've had in your life, how they have shaped you, and now you're bringing these into a relationship. And what happens in a lot of marriages is you just go into automatic behaviors. You just kind of go into automatic, and you stop trying to create this great space in the middle of this marriage. And that's why I think a lot of times you have these dissatisfied marriages. Well, you'll be married for 65 years, and you stay married till death do you part. But it wasn't the joy that you wanted.
So these next two things that we talk about, this equation, then the next thing, we didn't, I'm not sure, I think we maybe left it out or something, that it should have been on a worksheet, but it's not, so you might want to write this down. Okay, so E plus R equals O. The E stands for event. The R is response. So when you have the event, I walk into the kitchen and I see 32 seconds left on the microwave. That's the event. So the response is I either push clear and move about my day, or I remember it and wait till I see him and remind him that he didn't push it. So the O, can anybody guess what O means? Outcome. See, y'all are good at math. So outcome, and you always have to do this equation backwards, is what is the outcome that you want? Do I want a connected marriage? Do I want a better relationship? Or do I want to be over here in my silo knowing I'm right? Because that's what often happens, is I want to be over here saying, yeah, I was right. You didn't push that button, even though that's how that microwave is supposed to function, and that is how the discussion has been. So do I want to be right? Or do I want to be kind and either say, whatever, he was probably busy. We've got kids. He was trying to make them something. Thank you for making that, instead of me having to make breakfast. Or initially when we were first married, a lot of times what it came down to was, I had a colleague, and she had a sister, and her sister's husband was killed in this car accident. It was really tragic. And this was like like a week after we were married. And I just remember thinking like, oh my goodness, like I cannot imagine, you know, because of course, again, we're in that lovey-dovey honeymoon stage still. And so I remembered that one day and I said, yeah, thank goodness he was here to not push that button. Because what's the alternative? He's not here at all. And so, and it's whether it was just a disconnection or, yeah, like that was very sad.
And there's another example that I think really helps. And this is our challenge. Kara is a straight A 4.0 student that's very methodical when it comes to her notes, and I'm not that way. I was a 3.0 student in
Weighted.
college. And I just have all the facts in my head, and I can jump to one or the other. So this is her struggle to bear. But here's an example that I want to give. When we first moved to Illinois, our trash cans where we put our trash were in the garage. And as you know, weather-wise, it gets about as cold as it does here, I think, or pretty close to it. But the garage doesn't have a heater because we don't need a heater in our garage, so it gets cold in there. So one of the things that would happen, I would come home from work, and invariably, on any given day, there was a white trash bag at the entrance from the garage that goes into the house where our laundry room is. And it would drive me up the wall, you know this, because Kara would take out the trash and leave it right at the door. She would only take it halfway. And all she had to do was walk 15 more steps, put it in the garbage can, and the job would be done. And I remember, I would come in, and I'd be like, why can't you just take it to the trash can? Like, it's just right there. And that was a source of annoyance for me. But here's what we've learned. In a marriage, and that's, come on, some of you are thinking like, come on, David, don't be lazy. But it was kind of annoying, right? Like, finish the job. Yeah, perfectly. Yes, right? That's like a common thing. That
we all know trash is the man's job. It just is.
Trash or boxes from like Amazon or whatever, delivery boxes.
It's just your job.
Right. But
I'll find it in the Bible somewhere.
Yeah, well, you'll find it in the Bible. But here's the thing about this. Here's what we've learned, and here's what we've practiced has made all the difference. Here's a pro tip. Whenever something like that happens, choose the most generous explanation for why your spouse did what they did. Choose the most generous explanation. And what I started to realize, I said, is we're first-time parents. We have our eldest daughter is very needy, still. High maintenance, takes after me. And so I thought to myself, my wife has been home all day. She's been keeping the house. I go off to work. I come home. And so you know what? What I started to realize is, what's the most annoying part of taking the trash out of the actual trash can? What's the most annoying part? Taking it out is easy, but what's the most annoying part? Putting the trash bag back in. Isn't that annoying? Like, it is the worst. And what I started to realize was, first of all, she's doing the hardest part. All I have to do is just walk 10 steps and it's over. But I started to realize, hey, she had a long day. I don't know what, having to take care of a toddler all day long is not an easy feat. I can do 2 hours max. I mean, this last time you went to a retreat and I spent a whole 24 hours with them. I was pretty proud of myself. But
he also had babysitters.
I hired babysitters to help. But, girls at the church to help at church. But what I realized is, I don't know what her day was like. Did our daughter have meltdowns that day? Was it hard? Was she, I don't even know what she made for dinner. Was it more complicated? Kara, I'm grateful that she cooks on almost every single night or makes enough for leftovers. Like, we have a pretty traditional marriage, which we didn't set out to. It's just kind of how things settled for us, It's not something we talked about. But I don't know what else she did throughout the day. I mean, we texted. And so I started to say, you know what? She probably had a hard day, or she did a lot, and she's raising our daughter. She's doing a good job. She's cooking. Like, she's doing amazing things. The least I could do is take this out. And what it is you choose the most generous explanation for why your spouse does what they do. And what that does is it begins to change your own perception about them. And now you're more gracious. Now you're kinder. Now you're loving, because for us, the outcome is we want to have a loving, healthy, like we want to be married. We want to have a great marriage because, as you know, we've been through the opposite of that. And so for us, we're willing to absorb that little annoyance and reshift how we see it so that we can have the marriage that we always dreamed of, okay?
And, a lot of times when it comes down to that, and thinking about it, the response, what's really important to remember is what you have control over and how you're acting. Because this comes down to, again, like what we want our partner to do and what we want, like how I want him to act. And so in my response, I have to think about, okay, what do I have control over? I do not have control over whether or not he can push that button. And so this is the next kind of concept that didn't make it onto a sheet, but I think it can be pretty self-explanatory, or, like without the picture. So we're gonna talk about what you have control over using a car, but I need you to think about a car that probably none of you have because of where we live or where you live, but a two-wheel drive car. What is it called? Front-wheel drive? Yeah, I'm sure all of you have four-wheel drive, so don't think about a four-wheel drive. So in this, there's two things that you have control over, which are those front two wheels: what you think and how you act. And part of what you think is your perception, because we're always perceiving. And you can have, like when we've talked about it, like everything, there's always any event that happens in your life, anything, there's always so many different ways to perceive it. And that is such an important part of how we think about it. And then those, in a two-wheel drive car, the front two wheels are the ones you control when you drive, and then those back two wheels just follow along. And those back two wheels are our feelings and our physiology, or like what's happening in our bodies. Because if I told you right now, this moment, to start sweating, can you do it? No. What do you have to do to sweat? Well, you have to start running, or, for me, like if I get really nervous, I might start to sweat, but even then that's a thought that's coming into my head. That's my perception of what is happening. And so that's giving me these thoughts. And so I'm running then on, and so that's affecting my body and our feelings. And how often do we let our feelings control? And we say, I feel so angry, or I feel so frustrated, or I feel so overwhelmed. And we think that we have no control over that. And you don't have control over that. But what can you do to drive that car? And that is change your thoughts and change your actions. And so again, that just goes back to that E plus R equals O, and how you respond to it, and how are you thinking, and how are you acting, and what are you wanting to put in the middle. And if you think about the car, when you're driving it forward, and everything that you're looking at and what you want, that's what you want out there. And then you also, when you're driving, you have to pay attention to that rear view mirror. Every now and then you want to check it up. So imagine, the rear view mirror it's what's behind you. It's your past. It's everything that you carry with you. And if you are driving forward, only looking at the past, only remembering all the times that they frustrated you, that they did something wrong, that they didn't do what you asked, if you're always looking at that, what's going to happen? You're going to crash your car. And so in order to move forward, I'm not saying disregard it. We can't, it's illegal to drive without a rear view mirror, right? So it's still there.
Not in Idaho. Idaho and Texas. No, I don't know if that's true. But
So what happens in our past is important. And so much of what happens in marriage is we let our past and we let our feelings drive us and determine where our marriage is going to go.
And a lot of times, too, in that equation of E plus R equals O, for so many marriages, for so many of us, even if we're not married, we just instantly, automatically react to things. So there's an event that happens, and then we react to them, and then we're going to get the outcome. But when you choose to respond instead of react, that's where true power happens. I don't know how many of you have ever heard of Viktor Frankl. He was he survived concentration camps during World War II. He said, if you can find meaning in your suffering, you are going to be able to be stronger and more resilient, but there's freedom in that. And he said that between stimulus and the event, which is kind of this same equation, there is a freedom for you to choose how you're going to respond. And that's what Kara's talking about. You always have the power to change your thoughts and your actions. you can't tell yourself to stop feeling a certain way. You can't have a body ache and tell it to stop. I had a bad cough for 3 months last year. And I went to the doctor, and I said, he did all the testing. He goes, I don't know what to tell you. He goes, you're not sick. There's nothing wrong with you. And I said, well, doctor, will you just prescribe me some albuterol? Is that the
Inhaler.
And he said, there's nothing wrong with your lungs. I said, I know, but I borrowed my associate pastor's albuterol as a last resort measure. I'm not a doctor, by the way. I said, and it seemed to help. And so the doctor's like, okay, I'll prescribe it to you, but you got to come back in 3 months and check and let us know what happened. But here's what I'm telling you this is that cough was there because it was a time when there was a lot of stress in my life. There was a lot of projects that I was having to get done on top of being the pastor of a fairly decent-sized, large church, being a good father, being a good husband. And what it was stress. And my father-in-law, who's a therapist, remember they were there, and he stops, and he's like Mr. Rogers, real kind and soft-spoken. We're sitting in the living room, and he said, I've been hearing your cough. And I think he already knew I'd been coughing for 3 months. I said, yes, Bruce, it's stress. And he goes, okay. because it's true. Stress will make you sick. Stress will make your body do things that is foreign and that is sick. Mm-hmm. And so what ends up happening is we don't use our what's it called? And so you can't change how your body is. You can't change how you're feeling or the physiology, but you always have the freedom to change how you think about something and how you act or behave in a circumstance.
So let me share a story with you about myself to kind of help you see this and how all these wheels kind of play together. So, I shared with you last night that I had been through a divorce. So it was a Friday night, and my husband at the time came to me and said we were living in Florida. He was at a hospital doing his chaplaincy training. We had just been through seminary, so we were down there. And he came to me on a Friday night and said, I no longer believe in God. I no longer believe in marriage, and I'm moving out. And I was like, what? And so then, the next morning he just left, and it was over. And so that was a Friday. On Monday, I was supposed to start a brand new job as a clinical social worker at the very same hospital that he was at. And so that whole weekend, you can imagine, I was just a wreck. And so I was thinking, what is wrong with me? Is there another woman? Which he denied and still denies. And, he's like, well, then what is it? You have to tell me what's wrong with me. And he just kept saying, there's nothing. I just don't want this anymore. I'm just done. And I was like, well, if you can't tell me, like, how am I supposed to change? If you can't put something down and say, this is what it is. He's like, that's just how it is. And so in my head, I'm going, I'm not worthy. No one's ever going to love me again. I'm never going to get married. I'm never going to have kids. My life is over. My family is going to feel so much shame. My dad, who is a marriage therapist, is going to be so embarrassed he can't even help his own daughter. My friends, what are they going to think? Like all of this. So so that was a Friday. All this weekend, I wake up on a Monday. I couldn't get out of bed. I was perfectly healthy. I had run half marathons. I'd never had a health issue, no allergies, nothing. I was fine. I could not get out of bed. And my mom, she had driven down to be with me. I was like, Mom, you gotta help me. I can't move. And so like my back was just in so much pain. So it's my first day at this hospital, and I have to like shuffle around, and I can't tell them, oh yeah, I can't walk. Like I think I need a wheelchair or something. And I'm just like shuffling along, like trying to hide this pain. And so, my dad had me talk to one of his therapist friends, and she was like, well, I know what you're thinking. And she said, but I want you to try something else. I want you to try thinking about all the things you're grateful for. I was like, well, nothing. The list is nothing. And so she was like, no. Just think about something tiny. Just say, I am grateful that I have breath. I am grateful that I have fingernails. I'm grateful that I can walk. Which I couldn't at the time, but just any tiny little thing. She's like, please do that. I said, okay. So that night, I just started praying. I just started listing, I'm thankful for my sister. I'm thankful for my family. I'm thankful that I'm in Florida and the weather is warm. All these little things. And the next day, when I woke up, what do you think happened? I got out of bed, and I was fine. And the Bible teaches us this is how we were designed. Paul says, think about these things. And what's the list? You know the list. All the good things. Think about these things. So God specifically designed us to function better when we are able to, listen, Jesus was angry. We're not saying that you can't have these feelings, but it's what do you do with them? And how do you move through them? And can I do my other example, or do you have anything else to add? No. Okay. So I need a little audience participation now. I need a volunteer. And I have 2 criteria. I need you to think you are stronger than me and not have any physical limitations.
Like not have had
surgery, yeah. If nobody volunteers, I'm going to have Austin come down. But you can say you're stronger than me. I'm not going to be offended.
You're being
Voluntold. Okay, so I want you to stand right here. And
He's a Spartan.
okay, yeah, so he's legit. Okay, so I'll hold these 2 up, my lovely assistant. Okay, let's agree on one thing. Which one is healthy and which one is not healthy? Okay. Okay, so I'm going to ask you, and which one's your dominant hand? That one? Okay, so in your non-dominant hand, hold the Pepsi. Nope, the Pepsi. I want you to hold the Pepsi, hold it right in your chest next to your heart, and hold your dominant hand out. Just hold it straight out like this to your side. Okay, now all I'm going to do is push on your arm. Is that okay if I push down? And then I want you to just resist and try to hold your arm up, okay? Are you ready? Okay. See, I am strong. Okay, now, I want you to switch, and I want you to hold this apple. Yeah, and then hold the apple, just hold it there next to your heart. And now we've done this once, so you're probably a little bit more tired, but we're gonna do the same thing, okay? I'm gonna push down, and I want you to resist. Are you ready? All right, so now tell me your experience. Which one was harder?
This was easier.
Right, so the healthy one was easier. So you can try that at home if you don't think it's right. Oh, yes, that's his vice. But that's what it is our bodies. When we take in these things, whether they're unhealthy foods or our unhealthy thoughts, it brings us down. It makes us weaker. It makes us experience pain, experience sickness. I know David told that story. When I was a kid, I was not allowed to be sick because as soon as I came in and said, I have a headache, I have a cold, immediately my dad was, well, what's wrong? What's going on in your life? And it is, and I would be like, Dad, no, my friend had a cold and I caught it. That's all it was. That's all it was. And, but because, sure, so, there's illnesses out there. But a lot of it goes down to so much of what are we thinking and how are we behaving and what are these perceptions and these thoughts that we're putting into our head.
And in marriages, so much of the time, we're trying to control our spouse. You don't have to raise your hand to agree. But the reality is, because we all have that ideal world, that mental model, we are always trying to control our spouses, even if we don't know that we're doing it. And sometimes when we look at our life or our marriage, we think to ourselves, well, I have no control over any of this. But you always have control over what your thoughts are. And if a thought is not helpful, if you want to be happy, it's your responsibility to add a new thought to your life. So if a thought is not helpful, you change it. And that's when I said, when you come up with the most generous explanation for why your spouse does what they do, you're exchanging an unhelpful thought for something that's going to help. And it's going to create more love within you. And so that's all I'm going to say about that. And then the last thing that I did forget to mention in my part was when you think of your marriage as the space in the middle, what you put into the marriage is going to come out in equal parts. So what you put into it is going to affect your wife or your husband, and what they put into it is going to affect that as well. So if you're always in a bad mood, that's going to affect them. Your body language, we know when the other person is, upset or angry or hurt or sad, what you're putting into the middle is going to come out and affect everyone. And so sometimes we're upset, we're sad, or we're angry, or we're resentful, and that's what we're putting out. You're putting it out. You're always putting something out, and we're wanting our spouse to come and make us either feel better or apologize or whatever it is that you need. But what you don't realize is that the negativity that you're putting into the middle is actually affecting them. And they're like, well, I don't want to get near you right now. I'm going to go far away as possible. And so you always have to have that in mind. Your outcome is, and that's the thing, is you can control what you put into the middle. You can't control what your spouse puts into the middle. And the hope is that for every single one of you, that you say, by the end of today, I am going to do my very best to always put goodness and grace and kindness and love into this space in the middle, so that it not only affects me, but it's going to affect my spouse as well. And that's all you have control over.
And yeah, and I think, a lot of the stuff that we talk about, I think sometimes is people think it's, corny or it's awkward or, these things like this. It's like, oh, that's just for like therapy, or that's just for people who are really struggling, or, we don't need to do that. Like we're okay. And what I would say to you is we have been in marriages where we thought that, and we have seen what happens when you're not intentional. And so, even if you think things are going great, begin to start to see these things. Come up with something, if you need to name that space in the middle, if it's a beach ball or if it's your favorite plant or whatever, to be able to like take care of it. Because, and we talked about like the car, and when we're thinking about what we're looking out at, what you're looking at is your ideal world, what you think, what you want to happen. And, we talk a lot about, hey, like, what happens when I don't get what I want? And also, people, anytime we talk about marriage, everyone always wants to bring up resentment and what happens there. And resentment is just when someone else is trying to change your picture. And that's when it creeps in. And they're trying to change what you want, what your ideal is. And they're coming in and trying to say, nope, let's swipe that picture away and put something else in. And it doesn't have to be a big thing. It can be these little things, but that's where the resentment comes in. And again, you have to think about, is what I'm about to do or say, is it going to bring us closer together or push us further apart?
And as I said yesterday, resentment is one of those things that sneak into our marriages that we don't even know it's happening. And I like to think of resentment as a wall that we put up, because here's what happens when you're hurt in a relationship, when you have an argument, or you disagree, and you sometimes say things, and maybe you don't say mean words, but we've all had discussions and that get heated, and how we say things, and sometimes it's, man, how you talk to me was really painful. And we hold on to that, and a natural human experience is that we're going to start to build a wall, because we don't want to get hurt again. And resentment is not only building a wall that goes up, but it's building a wall like a fortress that goes out. And the reason that so many times we have difficulties in our marriages is because we've been trying to save ourselves from our husband and wife. And that's why it feels like all of a sudden, 10 years, 15, 30 years in, hey, we're just roommates, because we didn't heal from some of these things. And I know I'm jumping ahead.
That's okay. I was going to say, I don't know if we want to stop right now.
Yeah, let's stop
Because I feel
right
like this is a
now.
good place for us. Unless, does anybody have any questions, any thoughts?
What's that? Oh, that was up there. Okay, so we're going to pause. I think there's going to be refreshments for about, 15 minutes, and then